Our second reading then comes from Luke chapter 4, verses 1 through 13, and it is the temptation of Jesus. Let us listen for God's word to us. Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit in the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing at all during those days, and when they were over, he was famished. The devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become a loaf of bread." Jesus answered him, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone." Then the devil led him up and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And the devil said to him, "To you I will give their glory and all this authority, for it has been given over to me, and I give it to anyone I please. If you then will worship me, it will be yours." Jesus answered him, "It is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." Then the devil took him to Jerusalem and placed him on a pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to protect you, and on their hands they will bear you up so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus answered him, "It is said, do not put your Lord God to the test." When the devil had finished every test, he departed from him until an opportune time. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. If you've been following the story in our Sunday text from Luke over the last couple weeks here in the readings we've had, you may be about to ask yourself, now wait a minute, what just happened? Last week we had two different texts from Luke. First was the Transfiguration. Jesus wonderfully displayed who he really was. Moses and Elijah show up, make appearances. God speaks a reassurance to us. Well, maybe that was a little startling, getting God to speak to us from a cloud. Then consider the second text we had, Luke 6. There were three brief, nice stories: blind leading the blind, tree bearing fruit, importance of solid foundations for houses. Now today, we flash back in time to the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. We encounter him immediately after his baptism. For all we know, his robes have not even dried yet from the baptism in the Jordan. The word of God, "This is my son," are fresh in his ears. But now he is headed into the scary wilderness. This is a familiar text from the lectionary. It comes up each year at this time because it's included in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Mark is a very sparse. Luke gives us much more to go on in the story, to fill out the story. But repetition like that is not necessarily a bad thing. Kids know, and we know, there's a comfort in hearing a familiar story, right? Kids often want to hear those familiar words, that same book every night. They know when we start reading the story, there may be some scary stuff there in the middle, but they know they will, in the end, they know how the story will end. They and we know the scary stuff will not prevail. There is a happy ending before they are tucked in. In our text today, we know that Jesus will overcome. He will prevail in the multiple temptations to come his way. It's a great start to Lent with a familiar winning story, one that we can feel good about, even knowing the trial and trauma to come over the next 40 days. But let's talk a little bit about this wilderness concept, the wilderness idea. When I say wilderness, do you have a particular landscape that you picture when you hear that word, hear the word wilderness? Having spent more than a decade in Minnesota, one that comes to mind for me is the northern Minnesota wilderness area. An area of more than 1 million acres up there, accessed mostly by canoe, and more wildlife than people there. An area where you can go to escape people if you like. If you are from that area, it has a permanent impact on you. I remember one of my graduate students who was from that area, I remember fondly. Whenever things got particularly challenging, his favorite response, done with a good Scandinavian accent, was, well, if this doesn't work out, I can always go and get an axe and go cut sticks, meaning trees for pulp, go cut sticks in the woods. That was his way out. Cut sticks in the woods, comfortable, familiar story. Now, maybe you have a different vision of the wilderness, like the Badlands of the Dakotas or the salt flats of Utah or deserts like Arabia in Africa. Whatever the landscape, likely the most common factor is that it rarely features a lot of people in your vision. Wilderness can be a lonely place. Here is Jesus, without another human being around him, there in the wilderness for 40 days. But when challenged, he remembers Scripture. Maybe because of the mountaintop experience with Moses and Elijah, he quotes Deuteronomy to respond to the tempter's offers. It is written, one does not live by bread alone. It is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. It is said, do not put the Lord your God to the test. Jesus stands on the faith of his ancestors. He finds their words to be rock solid in the face of temptations. Jesus might not have anyone with him in the wilderness, but Jesus is not alone. Now I know you and we all have wilderness moments. I'm not talking about the vacations or camping experiences, that kind of wilderness experience. I'm talking about those moments of trial and temptation, moments when the devil speaks to us. Jennifer Molin-Kovish points out for us one of the biggest temptations we face during times of struggle and wilderness moments is the temptation to believe that we are alone. Part of what creates this loneliness is the myth of self-sufficiency, she says. This is a myth embedded in, upheld, and perpetuated by our society. It starts early and innocent enough, maybe even trying to reward positive independence and development activities of our toddlers. I'm sure you can remember a toddler in your life defiantly proclaiming, I do it myself, all right? Or taking great pride when they did it themselves. Now, even now, as an adult, I admit to letting out a satisfying proclamation of, I did it, when a challenging endeavor works out, when in reality it is, I really need to acknowledge the hours that I stood in the shadow of someone else's good work to make that happen. We are always relying on experience of both those who have gone before us and those who walk quietly beside us. There's another side of this myth that can lead to the flip side of self-sufficiency. Rather than the elation of success that comes with, I did it, what sneaks out is the heartbreaking sense that this is a big world and we are alone. In this time of pandemic, I think we have particularly vulnerable to feeling isolation and aloneness. No one else is there with me, I feel. I am told in Hebrew, one of the words for wilderness is more literally translated, the wordless place. Wilderness, the wordless place. Well, maybe we cover up this with our 24/7 news and our continuously active social media and whatever fills your airwaves during the day. Still, once the noise is removed, the wordless wilderness can be our landscape. From its dark places, we hear whispers, small voices from the darkness. You're all alone. To deal with this, we can again go to Jesus as our model. Our reading today tells us that he ate nothing for 40 days, and when the days were over, he was famished. Not some I missed my after-school snack type hunger. After 40 days, this is a gut-wrenching, body-clamoring, haze-inducing kind of hunger. The devil is no fool. He pulls from his bag of tricks the idea of a fragrant, freshly baked loaf of bread. I can smell my mother's rye bread right now. Certainly, Jesus hungered for bread. And if he could do water into wine, surely he can just change a stone into nice warm bread. Well, but we have to wonder if Jesus hungered even more for something else, for connection. Could he have hungered for God's voice? That same voice that called him beloved at his baptism? That same voice that directed the disciples to listen at his transfiguration? That same voice that tells him he is not alone. While he hungers for truth and justice to arrive in the form of God, he is not alone. For us, independent of whether it's 40 days or 40 years or 40 minutes, wilderness time can feel really, really long. For most of us, wilderness time is not encountered in nature anymore. Even if you're going to be traveling in a wilderness area, you're going to be well prepared with plenty of provisions, adequate supplies, a plan of how you're going to progress through it, an emergency contact if you don't have come out in time. And even today, you're probably going to have your worldwide GPS tracking where you are. It's pretty hard to get really lost these days. But the real challenge is when you are in the other type of wilderness, the woods of anxiety or the deserts of despair. That is when the real temptation to believe that we are alone is there, weighing upon us. In these past 2+ years, we have learned more about aloneness than we have ever cared to know. We felt directly impacted by words like quarantine and pandemic and no visitors. I know we have tried to be diligent about keeping ourselves and those around us safe, and we have been really responsible in our activities. Those are acts of Christian caring. But with them, maybe even in spite of them, there has been too often a coming feeling of aloneness. Maybe the true comfort of this passage is not Jesus can successfully stand firm against temptations directly from the devil. He stands up with mere human. He stands while mere humans like me succumb to that silly candy jar. While we succumb to these things, we swore that we would give up for Lent and continue to swear. Perhaps the real message is that we are not alone in the wilderness. We have a community of faith around us. We have the promises of God around us. Just as Jesus did, we have the scriptures around us. We have the support and guidance of the Holy Spirit with us. We, like Jesus, do not head into the wild without feeling the waters of baptism still dripping from our foreheads. We do not head into the wild without the mark of the ashen cross on our foreheads. We do not head into the wild without hearing that we're loved by God. In biblical accounts, the wilderness is a barren place of loneliness, a place of struggle, a place where people get lost. Jesus' 40 days in the wilderness serves as a symbol for us for the season of Lent. So in Lent, we can ask ourselves, what wilderness are we in? What inner struggles and temptations do we face? Are there questions of identity and purpose that nag at us when we're all alone? Yes, the wilderness is part of our story. But take heart, it is not the end of our story. Jesus demonstrates how to survive and then emerges from the wilderness and begins teaching and calling his disciples. He emerges reoriented, ready to live out his purpose. We have the voice that speaks in the wilderness, Christ shouting down the tempter and assuring us we are not alone. We have the promises that respond to our wilderness wanderings, the assurance of God's grace, the gift of worship and living bread that we will share, the communion of saints and the forgiveness of sins, the celebration of all the good things that God has given us. If you feel like you're wandering through the wilderness these days, lacking orientation, feeling confused or lonely, take comfort in this. Jesus is with you. You can bring him along with you in your wilderness journey. In closing, I'd like to share some words from Meredith Forsman about the text and the hymn we are about to sing. Forsman says, Jesus makes it through the wilderness having suffered hunger, loneliness, and temptation. That last verse is interesting. The devil departed from him until the next opportunity. So this wasn't the only time Jesus struggled, which makes sense because Jesus was fully human. The hymn we will share in a moment, Just As I Am, was written by a woman who also knew the struggle of being human. Charlotte Elliott suffered a serious illness at a young age and was left semi-disabled for the rest of her life. While dealing with pain and depression, she reported that she agonized over the question of her purpose and usefulness in life. Facing a spiritual crisis, she confessed to a minister, "I don't know how to come to Christ." The answer she was given, "Come to him just as you are." Those words stuck with her, and years later she penned this beloved hymn. Her story reminds us we are not promised that life will be without struggles, pain, sorrow, depression, temptations, or wildernesses. In fact, Jesus himself experienced it all. And that allows us to come to him just as we are, fully human. Amen. May we rise and share our hymn, Just As I Am.